The chandelier above the Lawson family dining table trembled slightly as the air conditioner clicked off. In the silence that followed, you could almost hear the weight of unspoken words pressing down on the room. The table was set for 6, though only 3 plates would ever be used again. It was late spring in Fairfield, Connecticut, a place where the lawns were trimmed with precision and every window seemed to reflect a version of perfection that wasn't quite real. Across that table sat Eleanor Lawson, the matriarch of the family that had lived on wealth, reputation, and the illusion of harmony. At 62, she carried herself with the grace of old money, but her eyes, sharp, guarded, had the exhaustion of someone who'd seen too much betrayal dressed up as love. Across from her sat her only daughter, Victoria, 32, polished, confident, and impossibly composed. She wore her grief like perfume, something carefully chosen to make others comfortable. Between them was a letter folded neatly, stamped with a lawyer's seal. It wasn't opened yet, but both women knew what it contained. Eleanor's late husband, Richard Lawson, had left behind an estate worth nearly $8 million. The letter before them contained the final distribution of that fortune. What Eleanor didn't know, what no one knew, was that the moment that seal broke, everything that held their fragile world together would be exposed. Outside, the sun dipped behind the hills, turning the sprawling suburbs gold for a moment before plunging them into shadow. Inside, Victoria's hand reached for the letter. Her voice didn't tremble when she spoke. "Let's see how much my father thought I was worth." Eleanor's face didn't move, but something in her eyes flickered. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. The paper tore softly. The truth began to breathe. "Before we go deeper into this chilling case, I'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. And as the details unfold, tell us, do you think this was a crime born of greed, betrayal, or something far darker? If stories like this keep you on edge, hit the like button and subscribe. It helps us keep uncovering the secrets some families will do anything to keep buried. The Lawson family had been one of Fairfield's oldest names. Their estate, a white-columned Georgian home at the corner of Woodmere Drive, had stood for 3 generations. Richard Lawson made his money in private equity, quiet deals, long dinners, and just enough philanthropy to appear respectable. When he died suddenly of a heart attack in 2019, the town mourned him as a pillar of success. But those who knew the Lawsons intimately whispered something else, about how control ran deeper than affection, and loyalty was just another currency. Eleanor, his widow, retreated into quiet charity work and morning walks. But Victoria, beautiful, educated, and ambitious, saw her father's death as the moment she'd finally claim what she believed was hers. She'd grown up in his shadow, dismissed as too emotional for business and too selfish for family. But now she was ready to prove everyone wrong. Reports suggest that in the months following Richard's death, the mother and daughter grew increasingly distant. Eleanor had control over the estate's finances and made no secret of her disapproval of Victoria's lifestyle. A Manhattan apartment, art school debts, and a fiancé she described as charming but aimless. Money had become both bridge and battlefield. Neighbors recalled seeing Eleanor and Victoria together at the house less and less often. When they did appear, Easter brunch, a charity gala, they smiled for photographs but never spoke between camera flashes. One of Eleanor's friends in a later interview described their relationship as a storm pretending to be calm. Still, Victoria kept visiting. She'd drive up from the city every other weekend, arriving just before dusk, her sleek black car cutting across the quiet suburban streets. Sometimes she'd bring flowers, sometimes wine. Sometimes, according to the gardener, nothing at all, just a stare that could freeze the air around her. On the evening of May 28, 2021, she arrived again. The housekeeper, Maria, remembered the way Eleanor seemed restless that morning, pacing between her bedroom and the study, checking the grandfather clock again and again. She said her daughter was coming, Maria later told detectives. She said tonight they would finally talk. At 8:07 p.m., Victoria's car pulled into the driveway. Security footage captured her stepping out with a small gift bag and a faint smile. She stayed inside for 3 hours. At 11:23 p.m., the cameras recorded her leaving, calm, composed, and alone. By morning, Eleanor Lawson was dead. The scene, investigators later said, was disturbingly peaceful. No signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no struggle. Just Eleanor, seated at the same dining table, her head resting on her folded arms, a cup of untouched tea beside her. Toxicology reports would reveal traces of a powerful sedative, zolpidem, mixed with something far more dangerous, a cardiac depressant found in veterinary tranquilizers. Detectives described the case as surgical in its precision. Whoever administered the poison had known what they were doing. There were no fingerprints on the cup, no foreign DNA, and no signs of robbery. This only clue was the letter, the will, half burned in the fireplace. But someone had read it before the fire took the words. According to the family lawyer, the final version of Richard Lawson's will had been updated 3 weeks before his death. It granted Eleanor lifetime control of the estate, with a provision that the fortune would pass to Victoria only upon her mother's death. Or if Eleanor remarried, the assets would go into trust until Victoria turned 40. In short, Eleanor controlled everything. To the outside world, it seemed fair. To Victoria, it was a betrayal that cut deeper than any insult her father had ever thrown. And so began what one investigator would later call a performance of patience. Victoria didn't lash out. She didn't argue. Instead, she played the part of the grieving daughter. For nearly 2 years, she visited, called, and wrote letters filled with warmth and nostalgia. She made herself indispensable, arranging medical appointments, bringing groceries, even hiring a new accountant for her mother. Friends described it as reconciliation. But behind the scenes, something else was taking shape. Her fiancé, Daniel Reeves, an art dealer with questionable clients, had been under investigation for financial fraud. Reports suggest Victoria was funneling small amounts of her mother's money, unauthorized transfers, masked as reimbursements, to cover his debts. When Eleanor's accountant confronted her, she denied everything. But Eleanor found out. Witnesses recall a confrontation at a downtown cafe in late April 2021. The argument turned heads. Eleanor told her daughter, "You've turned my love into your weapon," said one customer who overheard. Victoria's reply was colder than ice. "You taught me how." After that, Eleanor updated her will again, this time to include a clause removing Victoria entirely in the event of any financial misconduct. That update was never filed publicly. It sat, unsigned, in Eleanor's desk drawer. 2 weeks later, Eleanor Lawson was dead. The next morning, Victoria made the call herself. "My mother isn't waking up," she told the 911 operator, her voice steady but soft, like someone rehearsing calm. Responders arrived at 9:14 a.m. She met them at the door in a gray silk robe, her hair wet from a shower, her expression unreadable. Maria, the housekeeper, was the first to notice something strange. "Miss Victoria asked me to wash the teacup right away," she later told police. She said she didn't want stains on her mother's favorite china. The forensics team arrived by noon. Within hours, the cause of death pointed to poisoning. But the question of who had administered it and why wasn't yet clear. Victoria had an alibi. She claimed to have slept at the house, leaving only to buy flowers early that morning. There was no footage proving otherwise, but detectives would later find something she didn't expect. In the fireplace ashes beneath the half-burned will were fragments of a letter written by hand. Only 2 lines were legible. "I never meant to raise an enemy. Forgive me before it's too late." The handwriting matched Eleanor's. As investigators began to pull apart the timeline, they discovered that Victoria's fiancé, Daniel, had disappeared days after the funeral, leaving behind a series of encrypted messages to one of his associates. One of them read simply, "She did it, and it worked." The truth, like the poison, was slow but inevitable. The deeper they looked, the more the illusion of innocence began to crack. And soon what the Lawsons spent years concealing was about to be exposed. Detective Marcus Hale had seen greed wear many faces in his 22 years on the force, but never one so calm as Victoria Lawson's. When he arrived at the Lawson estate that morning, she was sitting on the porch, sipping coffee from a porcelain cup, wrapped in a shawl the color of ash. There were no tears, no trembling hands, just composure, an unsettling kind that didn't match the body inside. Hale would later say that walking into that house felt like stepping into a lie so well rehearsed it had forgotten it was one. Every room was immaculate. The dining table had been cleared, save for a single folded napkin and a faint ring left by a cup. Eleanor's body had already been taken for autopsy, but the air still carried the faint bitterness of chamomile and something chemical beneath it, sweet and metallic. The investigation began quietly. There was no forced entry, no theft, no clear motive, at least not one that could hold in court. But Fairfield was small, and whispers moved faster than evidence. Within a week, the local paper was already hinting at tension between mother and daughter and a family fortune in limbo. Victoria stopped leaving the house. When reporters called, she said only one thing: "My mother was everything to me. Please respect her memory." But behind that calm voice was a series of movements that told another story. Detectives found she had contacted her mother's bank within 48 hours of the death, inquiring about asset transfers and probate procedures. She told them it was routine. It wasn't. Legally, no estate could move forward until the death certificate was filed and the autopsy completed. That didn't stop her. Hale began digging through the family's digital records. The deeper he went, the stranger it became. Victoria's emails were filled with half-deleted threads, correspondence with offshore consultants, and encrypted attachments. When digital forensics finally decrypted one, it was a scanned document, Eleanor's draft will, unsigned but annotated in red. The notes, in Victoria's handwriting, circled one line again and again: assets to be held in trust upon Eleanor's death. Next to it, she had written two words: not anymore. Investigators requested financial statements and subpoenaed the Lawson Foundation's records. What they found was an intricate web of withdrawals, small amounts at first, then larger sums routed through art purchases and shell companies connected to Daniel Reeves. The money trail wasn't proof of murder, but it painted a motive clear enough for suspicion. Then came the breakthrough. The toxicology report identified the compound in Eleanor's bloodstream, a rare mixture of zolpidem and xylazine, a veterinary sedative not found in any household medicine cabinet. A search warrant for Victoria's Manhattan apartment revealed a medical-grade vial labeled XLM50, registered to a supplier that serviced animal clinics. Daniel Reeves had been a client. When questioned, Victoria maintained her innocence. She said she'd found the vial in Daniel's things after he disappeared and had no idea what it was. But her timeline faltered. Phone records placed her near a clinic warehouse in Yonkers, 2 days before her mother's death. The same warehouse was later raided, revealing forged purchase orders bearing her initials. Detective Hale's partner, Denise Quanin, later said, "It wasn't the evidence that gave her away. It was her silence. She didn't defend herself, didn't cry, didn't ask who could have done it. She just stared at us like she was already somewhere else." By mid-June, Daniel's body was found in a rental cabin outside Albany, an apparent overdose. Next to him was a torn envelope addressed to Victoria, but most of the letter had been destroyed by moisture. The one legible line read, "You said she'd never see it coming." That sentence changed everything. Prosecutors began building their case, but the Lawsons' wealth made every move political. Friends of the family hired high-profile attorneys, and Eleanor's estate attorney, Mark Delaney, refused to release certain files, citing client confidentiality. Behind closed doors, he admitted something chilling to the investigators. "Eleanor came to me 2 days before her death. She said she feared her daughter wanted her gone. She didn't want to believe it, but she asked me to hold a sealed document just in case." That sealed document would become the cornerstone of the case. When the court finally opened it, months later, it contained a handwritten statement from Eleanor dated May 26th. "If anything happens to me, I want the police to look at Victoria. She has become unpredictable. I love her, but she looks at me now as if I am in her way." It wasn't admissible as direct evidence, it was hearsay, but it shaped the jury's perception long before trial. The media called it the Lawson legacy murder. News anchors described it as a tragedy of wealth and inheritance, while true crime podcasts speculated about the psychology of a daughter driven to murder by money and resentment. But in Fairfield, people whispered about something colder: how love had curdled into calculation. In November 2021, 6 months after the death, Victoria was formally charged with first-degree murder. Cameras flashed as she was escorted into court in a tailored navy coat, her expression calm, almost regal. The prosecutor's opening line set the tone. "This is a story of greed hidden behind gratitude, of a daughter who poisoned the woman who gave her everything, because everything was not enough." The defense countered with a different narrative. They painted Victoria as a scapegoat, a woman grieving under suspicion, her fiancé's crimes unfairly tied to her name. They questioned the integrity of the forensics and hinted that Daniel may have acted alone, attempting to frame her to escape his own failures. The trial stretched for 8 weeks, unraveling layer after layer of deception. Each witness brought new fractures. Maria, the housekeeper, broke down on the stand as she recalled Victoria's calm demeanor that morning. She said, "It's over now. She's at peace. I didn't understand what she meant." Eleanor's friend, the one from the cafe argument, testified next. I told Eleanor to stay with me that night. She said she couldn't. She said she had to make things right with her daughter. The defense called Victoria herself to the stand, a gamble that would define the verdict. Her testimony was soft, deliberate, almost hypnotic. She spoke of loneliness, of feeling unseen, of her mother's cold expectations. She loved me, she said, but she loved control more. The courtroom fell silent when she added, I didn't kill my mother. I freed her from the cage she built for both of us. It was the kind of statement that lived in headlines for weeks, but the final blow came not from testimony, but from technology. During a forensic review of Daniel's phone, investigators uncovered deleted audio files. One was recorded 2 nights before Eleanor's death. In the faint hum of city traffic, Victoria's voice could be heard saying, once she signs it, everything changes. If she won't, I'll find another way. That was enough. On March 10, 2022, the jury deliberated for 11 hours before finding Victoria Lawson guilty of first-degree murder and financial fraud. She was sentenced to life without parole. Her calm never broke, not during the verdict, not during sentencing, not even as she was led away in cuffs. Detective Hale watched her go. Later, he told a reporter, she didn't see it as murder. To her, it was correction, a kind of justice twisted by years of pride. The Lawson estate was eventually liquidated. A portion went to charities Eleanor had supported. The rest, per her unsigned will, was placed in a trust for victims of financial abuse, irony that did not go unnoticed. Fairfield moved on, as towns do. The mansion stood empty for a year before being sold. But neighbors still talk about lights flickering in the study late at night, and a piano playing faintly through the walls. Maria swore she once saw a figure sitting at the dining table, head bowed, as if waiting for forgiveness that would never come. Sometimes the darkest secrets aren't buried in the ground. They sit quietly in the rooms we once called home. Victoria remains in Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, where she reportedly keeps a framed photo of her mother beside her bed. In a rare interview, she said, "You can't kill someone who never saw you. I only made her see." The journalist asked if she regretted it. She smiled faintly. Regret is for people who wish things had gone differently. I only wish I'd told her the truth sooner, that I was never her reflection. To this day, some believe Daniel's death was a coincidence. Others think he was silenced, that he knew too much. But one thing is certain. In the end, the illusion of family was shattered, and the love that once held the Lawsons together was the very thing that tore them apart. Sometimes the darkest secrets are the ones we keep from the people we love. And in this case, the truth was exposed, but the damage was already done. So what do you think? Was Victoria driven by greed, by years of emotional neglect, or by something even darker? Could any of it have been prevented if the truth had been spoken sooner? Do you think justice was truly served, or are there still secrets left buried? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want us to continue exposing the world's darkest family betrayals and hidden motives, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story we bring to light.